handles for a moment of rest. The oxen shifted their weight, causing the leather harnesses to creak softly as they settled, their rhythm blending with the gentle murmur of Hairston Creek, a soothing backdrop to the solitude of his farm. But the peace was interrupted by an unexpected sound. It wasn't the creek's bubbling song or the rustle of wind through the leaves. It was steady and deliberate. Footsteps, faint but distinct. Ezekiel's ears pricked with unease, and even the oxen twitched, their ears flicking toward the tree-line. Whatever was coming wanted to be noticed. Ezekiel straightened, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle strapped to the side of his plow, a makeshift holster he had fashioned from leather strips and rustic iron square nails. It was a necessity born from the frontier's dangers. He had seen too many settlers caught unarmed while they worked their fields, their lives stolen by raids. Ezekiel had resolved never to make that mistake. Trusting his gut came second only to keeping his rifle close. Emerging from the tree-line were 5 Comanche warriors on horseback, their movements deliberate and their faces solemn, unpainted, yet striking in their quiet dignity. Beaded strands adorned the manes of their horses, glinting in the sunlight like scattered stars. They surrounded a travois dragged by a sturdy horse, a stretcher fashioned from branches and hides. On it lay a woman, her skin pale and glistening with fever, her leg propped up on a mound of furs, swollen and discolored. The lead warrior's gaze met Ezekiel's, his arm lifting in a graceful gesture of peace. It captured the light breaking over the horizon, a symbol of mourning, a gesture as old and meaningful as the dawn itself. His voice was low, steady. "Tahuya," he said, nodding toward the woman. "Morning. Snake bite." Ezekiel hesitated, his eyes scanning the group. The frontier had taught him caution above all else. The Comanche reputation for raids was one he didn't take lightly, but another lesson loomed just as large in his mind. Small acts of kindness could ripple far beyond the moment, changing everything. And in the desperation he saw in their eyes and the woman's labored breathing, the answer was clear. Ezekiel didn't waste time. Dropping the reins, he turned and gestured toward the cabin. "Bring her inside," he said, his voice firm but calm. As Ezekiel gestured toward the cabin, his wife, appeared in the doorway. Her hand rested lightly on the frame, her posture stiff but steady. She hesitated, her expression shifting between curiosity and concern as her gaze lingered on the warriors. The frontier had taught her caution, but this moment carried an unfamiliar weight, one she couldn't yet name. Her eyes flicked to her husband, the silent exchange between them heavy with unspoken trust. Unbeknownst to them, Maya was in the barn, tending to the chickens. When the warriors came into view, she froze, her pulse pounding against her ribs. Through the shadows, she watched the group, her breath shallow and silent. Years of stories about raids flooded her mind, yet as the travois passed, her fear mixed with something unexpected, wonder. The reverence with which the men carried the woman made Maya hesitate. Then, pressing herself to action, she slipped out the back of the barn, her bare feet kicking up dust as she ran toward Will's house. Inside, the warriors laid Tahuya on a pallet near the hearth, their careful movements stark against the urgency in their faces. Ezekiel knelt beside her, examining the wound. The bite was deep, the venom spreading quickly, discoloring the swollen flesh. He glanced at the warriors, their solemn expressions revealing worry that needed no translation. "I'll do what I can," Ezekiel said, rising to fetch his supplies. "But it'll take time, and God's will." The leader stepped forward, his hand hovering gently over Tahuya's forehead. In hushed tones, he murmured words in Comanche, each syllable seeming to fuse with the flicker of the hearthlight. Another warrior knelt, opening a small leather pouch. He sprinkled fine, powdery earth onto her wound, his movements deliberate and reverent, as though guided by something sacred. Ezekiel turned to the shelf, scanning rows of glass jars filled with dried herbs. His hand paused, then settled on a bundle of crushed yarrow, its medicinal properties perfect for drawing out toxins and reducing swelling. "Boil some water," he said firmly, handing the bundle to Anne, and hesitated for a moment, her gaze meeting his. But whatever thoughts lingered in her mind, she pushed them aside. With a small nod, she moved toward the stove, her movements purposeful now, her concern etched into every step. The warriors lingered in the cabin's shadows for another moment. Their leader straightened, his voice quiet but steady. She is strong. We will pray for her. He gestured to the others, and they retreated toward the doorway, leaving behind an air of reverence that clung to the room like smoke. The next day, as the sun dipped lower, William Banta emerged from the woods, his rifle slung over his shoulder. He paused outside, his brows furrowed as he assessed the scene. "Ezekiel," he called, his voice low but steady. "How's she holding up?" Ezekiel glanced up, his face grim. "She's fighting, but the venom's taken its toll. This tea might help, but it's touch and go." Banta crouched beside him, his tone carrying a mix of admiration and disbelief. "You've got a knack for this, Ezekiel. Not many would risk helping Comanches, let alone a squaw." Ezekiel stilled, his hands resting on the branch of the tree. "Desperation doesn't know tribes, Will. They came to me because their medicine woman was away on a vision quest. And if we don't help, what does that make us?" Banta studied Ezekiel for a long moment, his brows drawing tighter. "You think she's someone important?" "I do." Ezekiel's gaze shifted toward the cabin. The way they carry themselves, the way they spoke her name. It wasn't just reverence, it's sadness. Whoever she is, she matters. Not just to them, but to the tribe. His voice softened, careful now, as though the words themselves carried weight. "They didn't come here by chance, Will. They came because she's worth everything to them." Will leaned back slightly, his eyes narrowing with unease. "I wonder how they knew you could help her." Ezekiel rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I don't know, but you've had dealings with Chief Wildcat. Maybe he told them to bring her here." Banta exhaled deeply, his expression shifting with the gravity of Ezekiel's reasoning. "Wildcat won't forget this. If she pulls through, it could mean something, or it could mean trouble if she doesn't. You've got guts, Ezekiel." Ezekiel allowed himself a small, bitter smile. "It's not guts, son. It's this place. It hardens people. Kindness isn't random here. It's calculated. Who you are, what you have, what you can trade. It all determines whether someone helps you or walks on by. But sometimes, it shouldn't be about any of that. Sometimes, it's about doing the right thing, because no one else will. And if you turn your back now, it's the kind of thing that eats at you." Their need brought them here, and their grief. Ezekiel shakes his head. "Oh well, it keeps me working." Banta didn't reply, but his gaze softened. He understood the risks, the unspoken tension that came with aiding a tribe known for raids and violence. Yet here they were, two settlers on the frontier, doing what they could to save a life. As the fever gripped Tahuya, her cries pierced the cabin, sharp and disjointed. Her voice trembled, shifting between broken English and Comanche. "Nu, nu." Her cries for her mother hanging in the air like an unanswered prayer. Ezekiel paused by her pallet, his brow furrowed, the weight of her pain pressing down on him. Across the room, En's heart twisted at the sound, though the words were foreign to her, and knelt beside Tahuya, her hands moving instinctively. She dipped a cloth into the basin of cool water, wrung it out, and pressed it gently to the girl's fevered forehead. The heat radiating from her skin was alarming, and En couldn't suppress a quiet murmur of worry. "It's all right, child," she whispered, her tone soothing even though she didn't know if Tahuya could understand her. She replaced the cloth, her movements steady and deliberate, trying to will the fever's fire to fade. Across the room, Ezekiel watched silently, his gaze heavy with questions he didn't voice. He pulled a chair closer to the pallet, dipped another cloth into the water, and pressed it gently to Tahuya's temple. Wordlessly, he mirrored En's careful movements. "We'll see her through this," he said quietly, his words both a promise and a plea. Hours later, when Tahuya's fever finally broke, her exhausted body slumped into quiet sleep, and prepared a simple stew with wild onions and hardy roots Ezekiel had gathered days prior. She coaxed Tahuya awake, holding the warm bowl with hands that trembled slightly from weariness. "Here, eat," she said softly, offering the broth with gentle encouragement. Tahuya's eyes flickered open, glassy and uncertain. Slowly, she took the spoon in trembling hands, her movements tentative but purposeful. Their communication was halting at first. Tahuya spoke in fragmented English, each word an effort. "Tahuya morning. My name," she murmured weakly, her gaze shifting to Ezekiel, searching his face for understanding. Ezekiel leaned closer, his voice steady but warm. "I'm Ezekiel," he said, his hand resting briefly over his chest. Then he motioned toward Anne. "And this is Anne. You're safe here, Tahuya," and offered a reassuring smile, kneeling by the pallet. "We'll take care of you," she said, her voice soft but firm, as though willing her words to carry the strength of truth. Tahuya's eyes darted between them, the trust in her gaze slowly unfurling like the petals of a tentative bloom. The door creaked open moments later, and Maya stepped in, her cheeks flushed from the chill outside. In her arms, she carried a bundle of firewood, the loose twigs rattling faintly as her steps faltered. Her eyes locked on Tahuya, and for a moment, hesitation held her in place. Then, as though sensing the fragility in the room, she carefully set the firewood by the hearth, her presence quiet but grounding. "She's awake," Maya exclaimed, her voice breaking through the quiet tension. Setting the wood down quickly, she hurried to Tahuya's side, a wide grin lighting up her face. "Tahuya, you're back with us," she said softly, her tone warm and reassuring. And, who had been tending the hearth, turned at the words, relief washing over her features. Ezekiel's shoulders, tight with concern, eased ever so slightly as he moved closer to the pallet. "That's good," he murmured, his voice low but steady. "She's a fighter." Maya crouched beside Tahuya, brushing a strand of hair from her damp forehead. "You've been through a lot, but you're safe now," she said, her words a gentle balm. "Maya," she said cheerfully, touching her hand to her chest. "You've got nothing to worry about. They're the best people I know, mother, father." Her brightness seemed to lift the room as she gestured to and Ezekiel. Tahuya's lips twitched into the faintest semblance of a smile. Ezekiel glanced at Maya, then back to Tahuya. "You're going to be all right," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Despite the questions swirling in his mind, who is she? Why does she matter so much? He pushed them aside, focusing instead on the fragile girl before him. As the days stretched into weeks, Tahuya's recovery was a slow but steady climb. Ezekiel worked tirelessly, his hands steady as he changed her bandages, the faint scent of herbal poultices filling the cabin. He prepared willow bark tea daily, its bitterness an unwelcome guest, but Tahuya sipped obediently as he muttered prayers for her strength. And never strayed far. Her presence, though quiet, brought an undeniable comfort. One morning, Maya returned from Will and Lucinda's house, her youthful energy lifting the atmosphere. While tending to the chickens and fetching fresh water from the creek, Maya paused often to share whispered stories with Tahuya, drawing faint smiles from the recovering girl. When Will and Lucinda arrived, their newborn daughter Eliza snug in Lucinda's arms, the cabin brightened further. Even Ezekiel softened in their presence, his stance less rigid as he sat beside Anne. Maya took it upon herself to introduce the new arrivals. "This is Lucinda, my sister. Her husband, Banta, and their baby girl, Eliza." Tahuya's eyes moved from person to person as Maya spoke each name. She nodded to Lucinda and gave her a weak smile. Then she looked at Will, tilting her head with curiosity. "Your Nomutatsu, Kokuchi told me. Man of strength." "Oh, I didn't know he gave me a name," Will said, looking pleased. "How do you know Kokuchi?" "You family." He gestured around the room, the question laced with curiosity. "Aha, Kokuchi is Puhu, father," Tahuya said. Will squinted, trying to place the meaning of the word. He pointed to Ezekiel and asked, "Father?" Tahuya shook her head, her expression briefly clouded. "Ape, not father," she said. Will rubbed his chin, thinking. Then he pointed to Maya, back to himself, and said, "Brother." Tahuya studied him carefully, then shook her head again. She pointed to Maya and back to Will, saying, "Tubu, not brother." Will's face lit up with a small, knowing smile. Slowly, he pointed to himself again. "Uncle." He gestured toward Lucinda, then to himself, and back to Maya, repeating, "Brother" to her. "Uncle." Tahuya's expression brightened, the lines of fatigue in her face momentarily eased by understanding. "Aha, uncle," she said softly, the words settling between them with quiet significance. Lucinda watched the exchange with a soft smile before kneeling beside Tahuya's pallet. Gently, she placed a bundle of wildflowers by her side, their vibrant petals defying the cabin's dim light. "You're doing well, Tahuya," she whispered, her voice steady but warm. "These flowers, they're strong, even when the storms come. Just like you. Keep holding on. Tahuya's gaze lingered on the flowers, her fingers brushing the delicate blooms. A faint flicker of a smile touched her lips, a rare but welcome sight. Will stood by Ezekiel, his arms crossed as usual, though his tone was warmer. Looks like she's got a fighting spirit, Ezekiel. You've done good here. Ezekiel's jaw tightened as he nodded, his eyes fixed on Tahuya's pale face. The swelling in her leg had subsided a little more each day, and though she was still weak, her breathing grew steadier. His silence carried more than worry. It held hope, fragile but growing. Lucinda rose, resting her hand gently on Ezekiel's arm. She's stronger than you think, she said. We all are. Her words lingered in the quiet, filling the room with a shared resolve. Will's expression shifted as he observed them. Perhaps it was the way Tahuya had clung to life, or how Ezekiel had remained steadfast in her care. Whatever it was, his usual bravado softened. With a small nod, he turned to the door. I'll go gather more wood, he said, his voice gruff but edged with purpose. Lucinda lingered near Tahuya, brushing her hand over the flowers one last time. Storms will pass, she murmured, her words wrapping the cabin in quiet hope. As the days passed, the bond between Tahuya and her unlikely caretakers grew. The cabin, once a place of quiet struggle, began to echo with the subtle rhythms of shared hope. Outside, the Comanche warriors lingered at a respectful distance, their silent presence a reminder of the world beyond the homestead, one of unresolved tensions and unspoken stories. Ezekiel, ever watchful, often found his gaze drifting to the edge of the woods. There was a sense of expectation, as though the trees themselves held their breath, waiting. The rustle of leaves or the distant crack of a twig often made him pause. It was during these reflective moments that he began to piece together the fragments of what Tahuya had shared and what the warriors hinted at in their guarded tones. Though they spoke little, their reverence for her lineage was unmistakable, her bloodline tied to wisdom, healing, and loss. One morning, the warriors approached the cabin, bearing gifts: bear meat fresh from the hunt, jars of golden honey, cured hams of deer, and intricately woven baskets. Ezekiel accepted their offerings with a solemn nod, his gaze meeting theirs in silent acknowledgement. For Anne, the gifts carried a quiet significance, a bridge of understanding forged from gratitude and trust. The warriors' solemn expressions spoke volumes, their actions a profound contrast to the tension often surrounding their encounters with settlers. Through these exchanges, Ezekiel learned more about Tahuya's lineage. She was the daughter of Wildcat's twin sister, Tahuya Puhu, a woman of great strength and wisdom, known among the coalition for her healing abilities and spiritual insight. Though the Comanche rarely spoke openly, their reverence for her mother was evident in their hushed tones and mournful glances. The rhythmic jingle of tiny bells, woven into braids and leggings, rippled through the air like a herald. Ezekiel's breath caught as a figure emerged from the woods, his silhouette framed by the last rays of light. Tall and imposing, with a presence that seemed to draw all eyes, it was Chief Wildcat. Ezekiel and Banta stood their ground, though the weight of Wildcat's gaze was palpable. Wildcat approached Tahuya, his expression unreadable. She is my niece. As he reached for the reins. I thought I'd never see him again, he said, his voice thick with feeling. For a moment, the weight of loss and recovery flickered across his face, a glimpse into a story he rarely told. Wildcat's gaze shifted to Ezekiel. The bells chimed as he stepped closer. You have shown kindness where others would not. Give thanks. Remember this day. for it is rare.
As the sun sets, we are reminded of the fragile threads that tie humanity together. The Texas frontier was a place where lives often teetered on the edge, yet acts of compassion could build bridges stronger than fear. Thank you for joining us for another Banta story, where history and heart collide. And remember, out here on the frontier, always keep your wits sharp, your heart open, and don't forget to keep your powder dry. Until next time, friends.